The studio buzzed with a restless energy, the air thick with anticipation as the live audience settled into their seats. The set of Face to Face, a primetime talk show known for heated debates, glowed under harsh lights, its sleek black table, reflecting the tension already brewing. Tonight's topic, a proposed law slashing veterans' benefits to fund overseas projects, had drawn two fiery guests: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a fierce advocate for military families, and Clint Eastwood, the iconic filmmaker whose own war movies championed soldiers' sacrifices. Both had personal stakes, Crockett with a brother who served, Eastwood with decades of storytelling rooted in veterans' struggles. The host, Carver, flashed a practiced smile, but her eyes betrayed unease, sensing the storm about to erupt. Crockett sat upright, her hands clasped tightly, her sharp gaze fixed on the empty chair across from her. She'd heard rumors of Eastwood's bluntness, his refusal to mince words, but she was ready, her mind racing with stats and stories of veterans betrayed by bureaucracy. Eastwood strode in late, his lean frame commanding the room, his squint as piercing as ever. The crowd erupted in applause, but he waved it off, slumping into his seat with a grunt. Carver kicked off the show, her voice bright but strained, outlining the law's divisive impact. She turned to Eastwood first, asking his take on the cuts. The audience leaned forward, sensing his answer would set the tone. Eastwood's voice was gravelly, cutting through the studio's hum. He leaned back, one hand drumming the table, and said, "This law's a disgrace, but let's not kid ourselves. Some folks here, like the Congresswoman, just want votes, not solutions. They'll cry for veterans but won't fix the real mess." The words landed like a slap, his finger jabbing toward Crockett. Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads swiveling to her. Carver's smile froze, her pen hovering over her notes. Crockett's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening as she processed the insult, the accusation that her advocacy was mere politics. The studio felt smaller, the air heavier, as every eye locked on her response. Her voice sliced through the silence, low but venomous. "Excuse me, Mr. Eastwood, but you don't get to sit there, making millions off war stories, and question my heart for veterans. My brother came home broken, and I fight for him, not for cameras." She leaned forward, her finger pointing back, her words sharp enough to cut glass. The audience murmured, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably. Eastwood's face hardened, his lips curling into a smirk, unfazed. "Sweetheart, I've seen more of war's cost than you'll ever know," he shot back, his tone dripping with condescension. The word sweetheart hung in the air, a spark igniting Crockett's fury further. Carver tried to intervene, her voice rising over the crosstalk. "Let's keep this civil, please," she urged, but neither guest listened. Crockett's hands slammed the table, her voice climbing. "You think your movies give you a pass to disrespect me? Veterans aren't props for your ego." Eastwood leaned in now, his eyes blazing, voice booming. "And you think yelling fixes anything? You're all talk, no action." The crowd was on edge, some shouting support, others booing, the studio a cauldron of chaos. Carver's pleas for order drowned in the noise, her face pale as she realized the show was spiraling. The confrontation felt like a runaway train, each word fueling the next. Crockett's chest heaved, her mind racing to stay sharp against Eastwood's barbs. She'd faced tough opponents, but his raw arrogance, his dismissal of her work, hit a nerve. Eastwood, too, felt the sting of her words, his legacy questioned by someone he saw as a grandstander. The audience hung on every syllable, their reactions a mix of shock and thrill, feeding the fire. Carver, desperate, signaled for a commercial break, but Crockett wasn't done. She stood, her voice thundering over the chaos. "You want to talk real, Clint? Let's talk about who's really fighting for veterans, because it ain't you." Her challenge echoed as the section closed, the studio electric with unresolved rage. Back from the break, The studio crackled with a raw, unyielding tension, the audience's murmurs barely masking their eagerness for the fight to resume. The face-to-face set felt like a battleground, the black table a divide between two unyielding forces. Jasmine Crockett sat rigid, her eyes locked on Clint Eastwood, who slouched with a defiant smirk, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. Host Ellen Carver, her voice tight, tried to reset the mood, urging a focus on veterans' benefits, but the crowd's restless energy, split between cheers for Crockett's fire and nods for Eastwood's grit, made civility a faint hope. Every gesture, every glance, carried the weight of their earlier clash, the air thick with unspoken challenges. Eastwood struck first, his voice rough as he leaned forward, ignoring Carver's prompt. "Let me tell you about a buddy of mine, a Marine, left homeless after Vietnam. No politician, including you, Congresswoman, ever lifted a finger for him." His words were heavy, meant to wound, his fingers stabbing the air toward Crockett. The audience gasped, some nodding, drawn to his raw emotion, others bristling at the jab. He went on, his tone biting. "You talk about your brother, but where's the change? You're just another suit making promises." His smirk widened, daring her to hit back, his story a shield for his aggression. Crockett's face burned, her hands gripping the table's edge, but her voice stayed steady, sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare use a veteran's pain to score points, Clint. I've spent years pushing bills to fund VA hospitals, bills you'd know about if you cared beyond your scripts." She rattled off numbers, veterans waiting months for care, suicides rising, her voice rising with each fact. The crowd leaned in, some clapping, others stunned by her precision. "You want to talk failure? Look at the system that's been broken. For decades, not at me." Her eyes blazed, refusing to let his story derail her truth. The exchange ignited, their voices overlapping, each word a spark. Eastwood scoffed, cutting her off. "Bills? That's just paper, lady. You're dodging. The real fight, like every politician." His condescension dripped, the word lady a deliberate jab. Crockett shot up, her chair scraping, her voice a controlled roar. "And you're just a loudmouth hiding behind a camera, Clint. You think your friend's story gives you a free pass to insult me?" The audience erupted, some chanting her name, others booing Eastwood. The studio a cauldron of divided loyalties. Carver's calls for calm were lost, her hands waving frantically as the show teetered on chaos. Their personal digs cut deeper, the policy debate now a backdrop to raw hostility. Eastwood's eyes narrowed, his voice low, venomous. "You're out of your depth, Jasmine. Stick to speeches, not solutions." Crockett laughed, bitter and loud, her hands on her hips. "Out of my depth? You're the one drowning in your own ego, old man." The crowd gasped, some laughing, others shouting, feeding off the raw energy. Carver, sweating, tried to pivot to audience questions, but the room ignored her, eyes glued to the two titans clashing, their words sharper than ever. The studio felt, alive, pulsing with the crowd's divided passion, some moved by Eastwood's gritty tale, others by Crockett's fierce facts. But Eastwood wasn't done. He leaned back, his voice booming over the noise, a glint in his eye. "You want to know the truth? Politicians like you are why veterans suffer, because you care more about winning than fixing." The accusation hung heavy, a gauntlet thrown, silencing the room for a split second. Crockett's breath caught, her eyes widening, fury and resolve warring within her. The crowd held its breath, sensing she was on the edge, ready to unleash something unstoppable. The silence in the studio was deafening, a fleeting pause charged with the weight of Eastwood's accusation. Jasmine Crockett stood tall, her eyes locked on him, the fire in her chest burning hotter than ever. The face-to-face set, once polished and orderly, now felt like a gladiator's arena. The audience's divided loyalties crackling like static. Some clutched their seats, moved by Eastwood's raw claim, while others murmured support for Crockett, sensing her next words would shift the battle. Ellen Carver, her voice hoarse from shouting, tried to interject, but her words were swallowed by the room's electric pulse. Crockett's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the surge of resolve to bury Eastwood's arrogance once and for all. She began, her voice steady but thick with emotion, each word chosen to strike deep. "You want to talk about why veterans suffer, Clint? Let me tell you about my brother, who came home from Iraq with scars you can't see. He waited 2 years for therapy. 2 years, because the system you're so quick to defend failed him." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on, describing nights spent talking him through despair, his pride shattered by a country that forgot him. The audience softened, some wiping tears, others nodding, her raw honesty cutting through the noise. "I fight for him, for thousands like him, every day. What do you do, besides make movies and point fingers?" Eastwood shifted, his smirk fading, but he wasn't ready to yield. He cut in, his voice harsh, dripping with scorn. "Save the sob story, Jasmine, we've all got one. Doesn't mean you're fixing anything." The interruption was a gut punch, his mockery drawing sharp gasps from the crowd. Some booed, others cheered, the room splitting further. Crockett's eyes flashed, her voice rising, sharp and unyielding. "A sob story? That's what you call a veteran's pain? Tell me, Clint, what have you done for veterans lately? Donated a dime? Visited a VA hospital? Or is your big contribution just yelling at me on TV?" Her questions were daggers, each one landing harder, the audience roaring with approval or dissent. The room was chaos, a sea of shouts and waving hands, Carver's pleas for order lost in the uproar. Eastwood's face reddened, his hands clenching, caught off guard by her directness. He opened his mouth, but Crockett didn't let him speak, her voice a relentless tide. "You sit there, acting like you own this fight. But where's your skin in the game? You talk about your Marine friend, but what did you do for him besides use his story to attack me?" The crowd was electric, some chanting her name, others hurling insults at her audacity, the divide deeper than ever. Carver, now standing, waved her arms, but the show was no longer hers, consumed by the clash of two titans. Crockett's words weren't just a defense, they were an offensive, stripping Eastwood's credibility layer by layer. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper, audible to every mic. "You've built a career on veterans' backs, but when it's time to fight for them, you're nowhere. I'm in the trenches, passing laws, begging for funding. Where are you, Clint?" The audience erupted, some on their feet, others stunned into silence, the weight of her challenge undeniable. Eastwood's jaw tightened, his eyes burning, but, for the first time, he faltered, his usual quick wit absent. The room felt the shift, the momentum swinging toward Crockett. Her final blow was surgical, delivered with a calm that cut deeper than any shout. "You call me all talk? Look in the mirror, Clint. You're the one hiding behind stories, not solutions." The words hung in the air, a challenge he couldn't dodge. The crowd's roar was deafening, some clapping wildly, others glaring, but all riveted. Eastwood's silence was louder than any retort, his face a mask of fury and shock. Carver, seizing the moment, called for a break, but the audience barely noticed, their eyes locked on Crockett, who stood unbowed, ready for the final round. The studio vibrated with a restless fervor, the audience still reeling from Jasmine Crockett's piercing takedown of Clint Eastwood. The face-to-face set was a battlefield, its sleek design now a backdrop to a war of words that had gripped every soul in the room. Crockett stood poised, her breath steady, her eyes blazing with purpose, ready to claim the moment. Eastwood, his face a storm of frustration, gripped the table, his silence from moments ago now a coiled spring, ready to snap. Ellen Carver, sensing the endgame, tried to steer the chaos, her voice thin against the crowd's roar. Some cheered for Crockett's fire, others clung to Eastwood's legend, but all knew the next exchange would seal the night. Crockett seized the floor, her voice clear and commanding, cutting through the noise. Veterans don't need our pity. They need action. I'm fighting for a bill to double VA funding, hire more doctors, cut wait times. It's not flashy, but it's real. She spoke of mobile clinics for rural veterans, job programs for those returning, her words painting a future where soldiers weren't forgotten. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others clapping, her vision pulling them in. "This is what I do, not for votes, but because it's right," she said, her gaze sweeping the room, daring anyone to challenge her commitment. Eastwood couldn't stay quiet. His pride stung, his voice a low growl as he lunged back. "That's a pretty speech, Jasmine, but it's just more promises. You think you're the hero here? I've been honoring veterans my whole career, while you're playing politics." His words were desperate, a final swing accusing her of grandstanding. The crowd stirred, some murmuring agreement, others booing his weak jab. His attack lacked the bite of earlier, his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt, but he pressed on, voice rising. "You're all talk, and veterans pay the price." The accusation was a last gasp, meant to reclaim his ground. Crockett didn't flinch, her smile sharp, her voice steady as steel. "Honoring veterans, Clint? You mean profiting off their stories while I'm in the trenches fixing the mess you only talk about?" The crowd gasped, then roared, her wit slicing through his hypocrisy. "You call me all talk? I've got receipts, bills, votes. What have you got? A DVD collection?" Laughter erupted, mingled with cheers, the audience now swaying her way. Eastwood's face froze, his hands clenching, her words a mirror he couldn't escape. The room felt alive, pulsing with her triumph. The tide fully turned. Carver, sensing the moment, stepped in, her voice awed. "Congresswoman, you've made your case tonight." She turned to the crowd, who were on their feet, clapping wildly, even those who'd backed Eastwood now nodding in respect. Crockett's plan, her passion, her unflinching fire had won them over. Eastwood sat back, his squint softer, his fight drained, the weight of her truth undeniable. The host wrapped the show, praising both but lingering on Crockett's clarity, her words echoing in the studio's hum. The applause was thunderous, a wave carrying Crockett's victory. As the cameras panned out, Crockett rose, her head high, her steps deliberate. The audience kept clapping, some shouting her name, others wiping tears, moved by her fight for those who served. She glanced back once, not at Eastwood, but at the crowd, her eyes shining with pride. The studio lights caught her silhouette, a figure unbowed, unbreakable. Eastwood stayed seated, his face a mix of grudging respect and defeat, the legend outmatched. The show ended, but the energy lingered, the audience buzzing as they left. Crockett's triumph a story they'd carry, her shutdown of Eastwood a moment etched in time.